In this video, you'll discover how to unlock your effortless creativity, not by forcing it, but by finally listening to what your unconscious has been trying to tell you. We'll explore Jung's concept of the shadow and how allowing your hidden self to speak dissolves creative resistance. You'll learn why originality is not invention, but recognition, and how what surrounds you right now is enough. You'll even be guided through a practical method of intuitive writing that opens a channel between your waking self and the deep well of your imagination. This isn't about becoming a genius. It's about becoming whole, about accessing creativity that feels natural, meaningful, and alive. To understand creativity, we must first understand its enemy, not the critic, not the competition, not the empty page, but the false self. You see, modern life has conditioned us to wear masks. Jung called this the persona, the social face we present to the world. It is the version of us that smiles when we're tired, nods when we disagree, and creates what we think others will approve of. Most people believe they're this persona, forgetting that it is merely a thin layer, a costume stitched together from expectation and fear. Now imagine trying to truly vulnerably create while wearing that mask. It's like trying to breathe through a plastic bag. This is where the block begins, the inner divide. When you sit down to create and suddenly feel stuck, uninspired, or numb, it's not because you lack talent or drive. It's because you've brought only a fragment of yourself to the table. The persona is allowed in, but the rest, the anger, the grief, the doubt, the irrational joy, the deep longing, those have been left at the door. But creativity does not emerge from who you pretend to be. It emerges from the union of all that you are. Jung believed that the human psyche isn't a singular self, but a constellation of selves, some conscious, many not. And within that constellation is the shadow, all the parts we repress, deny, or disown. These are the emotions you were told were too much, the dreams you abandoned for approval, the desires you've tried to forget. We bury them, but they don't die. They wait. And when we attempt to create without them, we feel the emptiness of absence. The unconscious begins to revolt not through chaos, but through silence. That silence, that's the block. The myth of the shiny creator. We've been fed a dangerous myth that creativity must always be joyful, positive, and polished. That to be an artist, a thinker, a maker, we must be inspired, floating on air, bathed in golden light. But this is not creativity. It's performance. Real creativity is rarely tidy. It's not about being impressive, it's about being real. It's messy, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable. And yet it is within this discomfort that the most profound art stories and ideas are born. Think about it, every song that broke your heart came from someone else's heartbreak. Every film that made you cry was rooted in someone's private grief. Every painting that made you stop and feel came from someone who dared to confront their shadow. This is the true alchemy of the creative process, the transformation of inner chaos into outward expression. Letting the shadow speak. So what would happen if you stopped trying to look good and started trying to feel true? Imagine sitting down to write, not because you have something wise to say, but because you're sad and need a place to put it. Imagine painting, not because you want praise, but because your hands won't stop trembling. Imagine singing, not to be heard, but because your soul needs a voice. In that moment, you are no longer creating from the mask. You are creating from the whole self. And that is where the block begins to dissolve. A practice of integration. Here's something you can try today. Simple but powerful. Find a quiet space. No distractions. Close your eyes. Take a few slow breaths. Now ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? Let the answer arise, don't force it. It might be anger, it might be grief, it might be a memory, a dream, or even a fear you haven't named. Sit with it, feel it, and then write. Don't edit, don't aim, just let it flow. This is not a writing exercise, it is a ritual of reunion. You are not here to impress. You are here to remember, to integrate, to reclaim your creative self, not the one shaped by applause, but the one shaped by truth. The shift begins here. When we stop judging our emotions, they become signals, not threats. When we stop censoring our thoughts, they become language, not shame. And when we stop hiding from our inner world, we begin to create from it. This is the beginning of creative freedom. You don't need more talent, more followers, or more motivation. You need permission, and only you can give it. Let your sadness speak. Let your confusion dance. Let your shadow hold the pen, the brush, the camera. Because the real block was never about a lack of creativity. It was about forgetting that all of you is allowed. We live in a culture obsessed with the new. We celebrate the genius, the visionary, the innovator, the one who seems to pull entire worlds out of thin air. But this worship of originality is not only misleading, it is harmful. It isolates the creator, burdens them with unrealistic expectations, and severs them from the very ground of their being. Carl Jung saw creativity not as the invention of something new, but the revelation of something forgotten. He believed that every creative act draws from a deeper layer of reality, the collective unconscious, a vast reservoir of symbols, archetypes, emotions, and memories that unite all human experience. To create, then, is not to invent, it is to remember, the collective unconscious, a deeper source. Imagine standing at the edge of a great underground sea. It stretches beyond the limits of your personal history, beyond your name, your story, your identity. It contains ancient images, the mother, the hero, the orphan, the trickster. It holds the feelings you couldn't name as a child, the dreams you forgot upon waking, the longings passed down through generations. This is the collective unconscious, and whether you realize it or not, every time you write a line, paint a stroke, capture a moment, you're drawing water from that sea. You are not alone in your ideas. You are a channel, a filter, a vessel. When you let go of the pressure to be original, you open yourself to something far more powerful: resonance. Resonance over originality. Ask yourself this: what has truly moved you in life? A song, a film, a moment in nature, a sentence in a book that made your chest ache. Now ask, did it impress you because it was brand new, or because it felt like it had always existed, like it named something you've always felt but never had the words for? This is resonance. It's what happens when your soul recognizes itself in something outside of you. True creativity doesn't seek to impress. It seeks to connect. And connection is born not from novelty, but from truth. Everything around you is material. You don't need to wait for a grand idea to strike. You are already surrounded by creative ingredients. The crumpled receipt in your pocket, the overheard conversation at the cafe, the photo on your grandmother's shelf, the childhood dream you never followed, the fight you had last week, that TikTok trend you love but wish had more soul. All of it is material. Creativity is not about invention. It's about recombination. Take what's already around you, mix it, flip it, reimagine it, Add your sadness, your humor, your confusion, your insight. That's creativity, not creating from nothing, but seeing everything as something, even the mundane, especially the mundane. The practice of noticing. Try this. It may seem too simple to work, but don't let that fool you. Sit down. No agenda. No goal. Look around the room. Let your eyes wander without control. Notice without judgment. A crack in the wall, a coffee cup stain, a bird outside the window, the way light hits a book's spine. Now write what you see, not as a writer, just as a witness. Write like a child describing something for the first time. That's when something magical happens. Your unconscious begins to whisper. Suddenly, the stain on the table becomes the shape of a country you'll never visit. The crack in the wall reminds you of a wound you never talked about. The bird is your grandmother, and for some reason, you believe it. This is not delusion. This is symbolic seeing a core tenet of Jungian creativity. You are a mirror, not a machine. Jung taught us that every human being is both an individual and a reflection of the whole. You carry a personal story, yes, but also the stories of your ancestors, your culture, your species. And when you create, you mirror back some aspect of the human experience. You don't need to invent anything to be creative. You just need to notice, to feel, and to respond. A poem doesn't need to be clever. It needs to be honest. A painting doesn't need to be new. It needs to be alive. A story doesn't need to be epic. It needs to be felt. The world is already speaking. You just have to listen differently. The liberation in letting go. Once you free yourself from the burden of originality, you begin to play. You allow your curiosity to lead. You stop judging your ideas for being done before, and you realize everything has been done before, but it hasn't been done by you. That's the difference. Your voice, your eyes, your scars, your joy, they shape the material in ways no one else can. And that is enough. When you create from that place, not to prove, but to participate, you enter the stream of something eternal. You become not a performer, but a translator of the soul. And that is the beginning of effortless creativity. We live in an age of endless stimulation, scrolls, swipes, alerts, and algorithms. Yet in the midst of this digital flood, so many of us feel disconnected from our inner world. We are overwhelmed by images, yet undernourished in imagination. Jung warned of this disconnection. He believed that the soul does not speak in noise. It speaks in symbols. It speaks in stillness. And that is where the creative process begins, not in force, not in perfection, but in presence. Witnessing, the forgotten art of creativity. What would happen if you stopped trying to be creative and simply started paying attention? Carl Jung wrote extensively about active imagination, a method of entering into dialogue with the unconscious through images, sensations, and spontaneous thoughts. But before we can enter that dialogue, we must first remember how to observe without judgment, not to interpret or improve, but to witness. In the rush of everyday life, we forget that the unconscious is always speaking. It speaks in symbols, slips of language, emotional surges, and half-formed images. When we stop and watch the world around us with genuine attention, the inner world begins to open. You do not need a breakthrough. You need a return to the moment, to the breath, to what your eyes are already seeing, but your mind has been too busy to feel. A simple ritual for creative reconnection. Here is a practice not mystical, but sacred in its simplicity. Find a quiet spot. Maybe by a window, maybe on a bench outside. Sit with no agenda, no task, no goal. Let your body be still, your mind gently softened, and just look, not at anything special, just the ordinary, the way sunlight hits a sidewalk crack, a bird shifting on a wire, a stranger adjusting their scarf, the rhythm of rain on metal. Now open your notebook, or the Notes app on your phone, and begin to write, not to make art, but to describe. Let the words come without editing, without shaping. Trust the flow, however clumsy, however strange. This is not journaling. This is not performance. This is an invitation to the unconscious. And when you create from this place, not to be seen, but to see you enter a different relationship with creativity. One rooted not in pressure, but in play. Symbolic seeing. The soul speaks in images. Carl Jung taught that symbols are the language of the soul. When we observe the world in stillness, we don't just see objects, we see metaphors. A shadow on a wall becomes a memory. A broken bottle, an old regret. A breeze through trees, a long-lost whisper. You begin to notice that your mind is translating the outer world into inner significance. A plastic bag caught in the wind becomes a symbol of being lost. A bus filled with strangers reflects how quickly life moves. A child laughing loudly reminds you of a self you've buried. These are not hallucinations. They are messages. And the part of you that receives them is not the logical mind, but the intuitive self, the same self that dreams, that imagines, that creates. When you write from this state of perception, you are not crafting sentences. You are channeling symbols. You are allowing the psyche to speak in its native tongue. Letting go of the need to explain. One of the most dangerous habits we develop, especially as adults, is the compulsion to make sense of everything. But creativity, like the unconscious, does not move in straight lines. It spirals, it drifts, it contradicts. To create freely, you must give yourself permission to be unclear. Not every sentence must be profound. Not every idea must have a purpose. Sometimes the most meaningful creations begin as fragments, scribbles, strange images that linger without explanation. Jung trusted these fragments. He believed that when we allow what is unconscious to surface even in incomplete forms, we begin a process of inner integration. And in that integration, we become whole. So the next time you feel blocked, don't force your way through. Sit back, observe, receive. Let the unconscious speak. The soul's reflection is enough. There is an elegance in watching, a sacredness in listening. When you release the need to produce and instead choose to witness, you begin to recover a part of yourself that modern life has buried. That part that notices the way leaves fall differently on different days. That part that hears meaning in a stranger's sigh. That part that feels poetry in silence. This is not the absence of creativity. This is creativity. Not something to perform, but something to practice. A relationship to nurture. A path to walk daily, even if only for 15 minutes, notebook in hand, watching the sky shift above you. And when you do this consistently, something begins to change. The noise of the world quiets. The inner voice strengthens. The block dissolves, not because you fought it, but because you listened beyond it. You do not need to force inspiration. You need to become available to it. That availability begins with attention. That attention becomes transformation. And transformation is the birthplace of art. At the heart of all human striving lies one question: do I matter? Beneath every story written, every song composed, every business launched, and every poem whispered into the dark Their pulse is a quiet plea, not just to be seen, but to be felt. This is not vanity. It is not ego. It is the soul's cry for meaning. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that we are not isolated egos inventing lives from nothing. We are participants in a much older story, a vast psychological inheritance shaped by patterns he called archetypes, eternal roles and energies that live in all of us: the seeker, the mother, the warrior, the creator, the orphan, the healer. These archetypes are not fiction. They are needs in symbolic form. And when your creativity touches one of these deep human needs, it stops being just self-expression. It becomes service. Archetypes and emotional hunger. Every human being, regardless of age, culture, or upbringing, wants to feel a few essential things: to be safe, to be loved, to be understood, to grow, to belong, to feel like their pain means something. Your creativity has the potential to answer these longings, not by being loud, not by going viral, but by being true. When you create from your own grief, you show someone else they're not alone in theirs. When you share your joy, you remind others that light still exists. When you build something useful, you help someone feel less lost. Creativity, at its most powerful, is a form of emotional nutrition, and our world is starving, from expression to connection. Think of the last time you were deeply moved by a piece of art, a short film, a podcast, or even a single quote online. Chances are, it didn't just make you think, it made you feel. It named something you didn't know how to say. It mirrored a part of you that felt invisible. It made your interior life feel seen. That is what it means to serve a need. You're not trying to impress. You're trying to understand. And in that understanding, you create a bridge not from artist to audience, but from one human psyche to another. Jung believed this bridge was the soul's work. It's how the individual integrates with the collective, not by conforming, but by contributing something honest, symbolic, and alive. How to create with purpose, without losing soul. You don't have to sacrifice creativity for utility. You simply have to ask better questions. Not, what should I make? But what do people need right now? Do they need to laugh, to cry, to remember they're not broken, to believe something beautiful is still possible? Let that guide your expression. Write a poem that names a silent pain. Design a product that makes someone's morning easier. Tell a story that shows resilience, not perfection. When you create this way, you don't have to push your work onto people. They find it because it speaks to something ancient inside them. Jung taught that the psyche responds to symbols with recognition. When you embed your work with authentic meaning, it resonates like a tuning fork. And that resonance is what makes something go deep. Your shadow can be a gift to others. So many of us are ashamed of the parts we hide, the fear, the self-doubt, the failures. But what if the very thing you're trying to conceal is what someone else needs to hear? What if your shame becomes someone else's salvation? This is the paradox Jung embraced. The shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of light. Not a blinding spotlight of performance, but a soft, steady flame of truth. When you allow yourself to create from your full self, including the parts you once rejected, you offer others permission to do the same. And in a world that rewards filters and perfection, that kind of honesty is revolutionary. Creativity that heals. Imagine this. Your video doesn't just entertain, it eases someone's anxiety. Your sketch doesn't just decorate, it expresses a memory that was too painful to speak. Your app doesn't just function, It gives a lonely person a sense of connection. Now you're not just making content. You're offering medicine, not with arrogance, but with humility. Not as a savior, but as a fellow traveler who dared to say, "I've felt this too." Purpose is not strategy. It's soul. When creativity becomes aligned with meaning, it no longer burns you out. Because now you're not creating to prove you're worthy, you're creating to give. And giving, when it's rooted in truth, doesn't drain. It fills. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." When your creativity aligns with that journey, it no longer feels like a task. It feels like a calling. So the next time you ask yourself what to make, pause and listen for the deeper whisper. Ask not what the market wants. Ask what the human spirit needs. And if you give from that place, imperfect, honest, whole, your work will always matter. Because someone somewhere has been waiting for exactly what you have the courage to create. Creativity was never meant to be a race. It was never meant to be measured in clicks, trends, or validation. It is not a performance for the world, it is a pilgrimage back to the self. Carl Jung believed that our greatest task is to become whole, not perfect, but whole. To retrieve the lost parts of ourselves, to embrace the shadow, to listen to the unconscious, not as an enemy, but as an ancient guide. When we create from that place, integrated, present, and awake, our work takes on a deeper resonance. It stops being noise and becomes medicine. You are not blocked. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are simply being asked to remember that your emotions are not in the way, they are the way. That what you notice in silence is more valuable than what you chase in noise. That originality is not invention, it is revelation. In the end, creativity is not something we do, it is something we allow. It flows through the cracks of our masks, through the tears we hide, through the strange dreams we dismiss. It speaks in symbols, it moves in images. And when we stop trying to control it, when we begin to trust it, it returns, like a river we thought had dried, like a voice we thought we'd lost, like the soul patiently waiting for us to listen. Let's keep the conversation alive. If this journey stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your deeper self or gave you permission to feel again, I invite you to continue exploring this path with me. Subscribe to my channel for more insights rooted in psychology, creativity, and soulful living. Here, we don't chase the surface. We dive into the depth. We talk about the real, the raw, the symbolic, the human. Comment below and share what resonated with you the most in this video. Have you ever experienced a moment when your creativity flowed after letting go? What part of your shadow are you ready to invite into your creative process? Your voice matters, your story matters, and your presence here is not an accident. We're building more than a channel. We're building a space for the soul to breathe, for art to heal, and for creators to remember that they were never meant to be machines. They were meant to be mirrors. So go now not to be perfect, but to be present. Create something true, even if it's small, even if it's messy, because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for exactly that. And when you make it not to impress, but to connect, you've already succeeded. Subscribe. Comment, be real, because the journey of wholeness isn't walked alone, it's walked together. One symbol, one story, one act of courage at a time. Welcome to the path.